He was the kind of player that made Raider Nation believe. Precise, unshakable, legendary. Fred Biletnikoff didn't just catch passes. He carved his name into the soul of the game. From the roaring crowds of the Oakland Coliseum to the bright lights of Super Bowl glory, he was everything the silver and black stood for. Grit, skill, and unmatched heart. But behind the accolades, behind the highlights and Hall of Fame bust, lies a story few have dared to tell. A story that doesn't fit neatly into the record books. A shadow that followed him long after the final whistle blew. It's not about stats or trophies. It's about a man, a legend, and the haunting reality that greatness on the field doesn't always protect you from what waits off it. This is the side of Fred Biletnikoff the world forgot, the untold fall of a Raiders icon. From humble beginnings to Raiders royalty, the kid from Erie who refused to quit. Long before Fred Biletnikoff was lighting up NFL scoreboards, he was just a skinny kid in Erie, Pennsylvania. Overlooked, underestimated, and quietly determined. Raised in a hard-working, blue-collar household, Fred didn't have the flash, but he had something much more valuable: grit. That toughness would become his trademark, both in life and on the field. He took that fire to Florida State University, where he turned heads with his smooth route running and sticky hands. He didn't have elite speed, but he didn't need it. What set Fred apart was his football IQ and discipline. By his senior year, he caught 13 touchdown passes, carving his name into FSU history and placing himself firmly on the radar of pro scouts. Draft day decisions and a new home in Oakland. In 1965, Fred was drafted by both the AFL's Oakland Raiders and the NFL's Detroit Lions. The choice wasn't easy, but he rolled the dice on the upstart Raiders, a decision that would define his legacy. In Oakland, Fred found a franchise that matched his rebellious spirit and relentless attitude. From the start, Biletnikoff made an impression. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, but he was dependable, the guy who'd run perfect routes and make impossible catches when it mattered most. Teaming up with quarterbacks like Darryl LaMonica and later Ken the Snake Stabler, Fred became a key figure in the Raiders' feared passing game throughout the late 60s and 70s. Super Bowl glory and MVP status. Fred's crowning moment came in Super Bowl XI, where the Raiders faced the Minnesota Vikings. He didn't score a touchdown, but his 4 catches for 79 yards set up multiple scores. His clutch performance earned him the Super Bowl MVP award, a rare achievement for a receiver who didn't find the end zone. But again, that was Fred's style. Quiet excellence when it mattered most. He embodied the Raiders' ethos, tough, unorthodox, and impossible to shake. He wore stickum on his hands, arms, and even socks. Anything to get the edge. Opponents laughed, but Fred kept catching everything thrown his way. The heart of a dynasty, over 14 seasons, Fred racked up 589 receptions, 8,974 receiving yards, and 76 touchdowns, becoming one of the most consistent and respected receivers of his era. But his value went beyond numbers. He was a leader, a mentor, and a pillar of the Raiders dynasty. Al Davis, the architect of the Raiders, admired Fred for exactly what he was: passionate, precise, and all in on every play. The Raiders of the 70s were tough and swaggering, and Fred was right there in the middle of it all, the steady hand in the storm. When he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1988, it simply confirmed what Raider Nation already knew. Fred Biletnikoff wasn't just a star, he was a legend. The tragic fall, personal struggles and setbacks, a star's struggles behind closed doors. Fred Biletnikoff's career was defined by poise, precision, and passion. But behind the on-field excellence was a man quietly battling emotional wounds and personal demons that never made the headlines. While the fans saw the sure-handed wide receiver carving up defenses, few knew the toll fame and pressure were taking on him. Like many athletes of his era, Biletnikoff played through pain, physical, emotional, and psychological, with little support and even less acknowledgement. As the years passed, the hits accumulated not just on the field but within. Teammates would later recall how Biletnikoff often kept to himself off the field. He wasn't just fighting opposing cornerbacks. He was fighting a growing storm inside, the shadow of his past. After retiring, Biletnikoff tried to transition into coaching and life beyond football, but a series of personal tragedies would test him in unimaginable ways. One of the deepest blows came in the most unexpected and cruel form. His daughter, Tracy Biletnikoff, was murdered in 1999. The shock and heartbreak of losing a child was a weight no football field could prepare him for. The public was stunned, but for Fred, it was a collapse of his entire world. Tracy had struggled with addiction, and Fred had worked tirelessly to support her recovery. Her death wasn't just personal, it was a painful reminder of all the invisible battles families face, even those who once stood on the highest pedestal. The fall from glory, Biletnikoff's tragic end. Though Fred Biletnikoff physically endured the rigors of football, his spirit was battered in ways no opponent could inflict. The trauma of losing his daughter changed him. He began using his pain to help others, founding the Biletnikoff Foundation, a nonprofit aimed at supporting young people recovering from substance abuse. It was a mission rooted in grief, but fueled by love. Still, the legend who once danced in the end zone now carried a sadness that never left him. Interviews from the 2000s showed a man who spoke more about healing than highlight reels. A hero to many, but haunted by what he couldn't protect. The tragedy didn't erase his greatness, but it complicated it. Fans admired his toughness on the field, but grew to respect the emotional strength it took to keep going off it. Fred Biletnikoff's fall wasn't marked by disgrace, scandal, or controversy. It was marked by pain, by the kind of suffering that doesn't make headlines, but lingers forever. And while many remember him for his iconic catches and MVP moments, the full story of his legacy lies in how he turned tragedy into purpose. The final years, a legend lost to time. The final touchdown, life after football. When Fred Biletnikoff retired from the NFL in 1978, he walked away as one of the most accomplished wide receivers of his time. Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, multiple Pro Bowls, and a member of one of the most feared offenses in football history. Biletnikoff had done it all, but like so many athletes from his era, retirement wasn't a graceful fade into the spotlight. It was a slow, painful descent into obscurity. Football had consumed his life for decades, and once it was gone, so was the structure that held him steady. He tried to stay connected to the game, coaching stints with the Raiders and even in the Canadian Football League. But nothing filled the void left by Sunday glory. The roar of the crowd became a distant memory, replaced by quiet days and personal reflection. The speed, grace, and toughness that defined Fred on the field slowly gave way to a more somber reality. A man trying to find himself beyond the game that made him a legend. Forgotten by time, remembered by few. As years passed, Biletnikoff's name gradually faded from the spotlight. New generations of Raiders fans knew the silver and black, but not always the legends who built the foundation. While his number 25 had once struck fear into opposing defenses, it now hung in relative silence, honored but rarely mentioned. Despite his Hall of Fame induction in 1988, Biletnikoff never became a regular face on TV or in the media. Unlike other legends who remained in the limelight, Fred quietly drifted away from the public eye. His humble demeanor and introverted personality meant he never sought out attention, even as it vanished. But behind the scenes, Fred's heart was still with those in need. His daughter Tracy's tragic death had left a permanent scar, but also sparked a mission. Through the Biletnikoff Foundation, Fred poured his energy into helping young women recover from addiction, abuse, and trauma. It was no longer about touchdowns or trophies. It was about healing, giving, and honoring his daughter's life by saving others. Still, despite these efforts, many in the broader football world forgot just how dominant and influential Biletnikoff had once been. His legacy was preserved mostly in the hearts of longtime Raiders fans and in quiet moments of appreciation from teammates and coaches who remembered the brilliance of his route running and unmatched hands. The quiet resilience of a forgotten icon. Fred never chased recognition. He had nothing to prove. Yet the slow erosion of his legacy reflected a larger truth. Not all legends stay in the spotlight. Some fade not because they failed, but because the world simply moved on. And yet, some never forgot. Former Raiders like Tim Brown and Jerry Rice spoke of Biletnikoff with reverence, crediting his discipline and technique as a foundation for their own greatness. Raiders Nation remembered. His name lived on through the annual Biletnikoff Award, given to the nation's best college receiver, a tribute to a man whose precision defined an era. Fred Biletnikoff may have stepped out of the limelight, but he never stopped being a symbol of toughness, grace, and quiet resilience. His later years were marked not by the roar of the crowd, but by the whispers of respect and the lives he touched far beyond the field. Resurrecting greatness, the redemption and legacy of Fred Biletnikoff. Remembering the true hero of Raider Nation. Fred Biletnikoff was never the loudest, never the flashiest, but he was always the one who showed up when it mattered most. In a league where greatness is often measured in highlight reels and headlines, Fred's legacy was built on something far deeper: reliability, heart, and sheer will. He became a cornerstone of the Raiders' identity. His crisp route running, unbelievable hands, and fearless plays across the middle helped forge the silver and black's intimidating image. For decades, he was the gold standard for Raiders receivers, the one others looked up to, the one they aspired to become. But Fred's story wasn't just about stats and rings. It was about perseverance. He faced adversity, both on and off the field, and still stood tall. His struggles made him human, and in that humanity, his heroism became even clearer. The final touch, a legacy reclaimed. For a while, it seemed like Fred Biletnikoff's name had slipped through the cracks of football history, tucked away behind louder legends and newer faces. But the truth is, his impact never disappeared. It only waited for the world to catch up and appreciate the full weight of his journey. The Biletnikoff Award, given annually to the best college wide receiver, has helped keep his name alive, not just as a reminder of his on-field brilliance, but of what it truly means to be great. Recipients of the award join a legacy that is about more than performance. It's about dedication, resilience, and grace under pressure. His foundation, created in memory of his daughter Tracy, stands as one of the most meaningful parts of his legacy. What began as personal tragedy became a beacon of hope for countless young lives. Through his grief, Fred chose to fight for others, to turn pain into purpose. That's not just redemption, that's greatness redefined. More than a statistic, more than a struggle, Fred Biletnikoff's life is a reminder that even legends stumble. Even icons have shadows, and that's what makes their light shine even brighter. His story isn't just about what he overcame, but about how he gave back, how he turned a fall from grace into a rise towards something even more meaningful. In the eyes of Raiders Nation, Fred isn't just remembered, he's revered. His fingerprints are all over the team's history, and his spirit lives on in the toughness and grit the franchise still embodies today. Posthumous tributes and celebrations continue to honor him. Former teammates, coaches, and even younger players speak of his influence with admiration. Statues and stadium banners may fade, but Fred Biletnikoff's story, both the victories and the vulnerability, will never be forgotten. Fred didn't just catch touchdowns, he caught the hearts of fans. And even when life knocked him down, he stood tall for those who needed him most. In the end, Fred Biletnikoff wasn't defined by his fall, but by the courage with which he rose, beyond the fall, honoring Fred Biletnikoff's full story. There are stories in sports that are easy to tell, the ones filled with trophies, stats, and clear victories. Then there are the ones like Fred Biletnikoff's, stories filled with brilliance, yes, but also pain, struggle, and redemption. Stories that don't fit neatly into a highlight reel, but live forever in the hearts of fans. Fred wasn't just a wide receiver, he was the soul of a team, the heartbeat of an era, and a fighter in ways most never saw. From the glory of Super Bowl XI to the silent battles behind the scenes, Fred gave everything he had to the game, to his family, and to a legacy that's as complex as it is unforgettable. Yes, his path was far from perfect, but maybe that's what made it truly powerful. It wasn't just the catches or the MVP titles. It was his fight to keep going, to heal, to give back, to be more than just a name on a stat sheet. Now we want to hear from you. Raider Nation. What do you remember about Fred Biletnikoff? Was it a legendary catch? A quiet moment of leadership? Or maybe the way he inspired you beyond football? Drop your favorite memory, tribute, or thought in the comments. Because Fred's story isn't just about how he fell, it's about how he rose and how we choose to remember him. Let's make sure this legend is never forgotten, not just for what he did on the field, but for the full human story that made him unforgettable.